Welcome once again to another edition of Quoth the Raven, Lewis Bright Raven. I'm your host, Lewis Bright Raven. Tonight I'm joined by the gentleman who helped make that animation possible. My co-host tonight, Chris Hall.
Hello.
Tonight's topic is the FX Marvel TV series Legion that ran from 2017 to 2019 for 27 episodes. We're going to overview all 27, so we're going to be diving deep into the rabbit hole this episode, so I hope you brought your popcorn. But if you didn't, it won't be here. We're gonna be here a while.
Yeah.
So what's been going on with you so far this week, Chris?
Just working, getting over the holidays. I managed to get myself a new gig with a company called Big Dog Inc.
Okay.
Tom Hutchinson.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty cool. Yeah, just keeping busy.
Okay, cool.
I had a relatively non-eventful New Year's, so it was just me, Angie, and the dogs.
Yeah. Well, at least your dogs didn't do what your neighbor's dogs did.
Right? Oh my goodness. I get this frantic message from Angie, come here, please. And she proceeds to tell me that our friends, they have two golden doodles, right? And they treat these golden doodles like these are basically their kids. They got into and ate an entire basket, gift basket of chocolate, wrappers and all. And so if that wasn't bad enough, the next day, one of them got in and ate an entire bag of walnuts. So needless to say, there's a lot of shit going on, both figuratively and literally. So.
But the thing is, it's not good, folks. That means that these poor dogs are going to have to go to the vet.
Yes.
Because you're talking about eating a lot of cellophane, a lot of other things that aren't necessarily digestible, and it's not good.
No.
So we are wishing them the best and hoping that the vets can help the animals without too much problem or surgery or anything. That's
having to be too intrusive. Yeah,
that's what we hope for them. But okay, let's go ahead and move on to the first season of Legion. Legion Season 1 aired in 2017. It was developed by Noah Hawley, directed by Noah Hawley, Michael Uppendahl, Larissa Kondracki, Tim Malantz, Hiro Murai, and Denny Gordon. Written by Noah Hawley, Peter Calloway, Nathaniel Hepburn, and Jennifer Hale, based on the stories by Chris Claremont and Bill Sienkiewicz from the Marvel Comics. Executive producers were Noah Hawley, John Cameron, Nora Schuler-Donner, Brian Singer, Simon Kinberg, Steve Blackman, Jeff Loeb, Jim Corey, Alan Fine, Stan Lee, not really, Joe Quesada, and Kareem Zarek, but they have to give Stan his credit,
Of course.
Yeah. The producers were Brian Leslie Parker and Regis Kimball. Starring Dan Stevens as David Howler Legion, Rachel Keller as Sydney Barrett, Aubrey Plaza as Lenny, Bill Irwin as Carrie Loudermilk, the male version, Jeremy Harris as Tommy, Amber Midthunder as Carrie, the female version, and we'll get to explain that in a little bit. Katie Atherton as David Howler's sister, Jean Smart as Melanie, David Negaban as a character we'll mention a little bit later because I don't want to spoil the reveal. Jermaine Clement, who is another character we don't want to reveal too much until later, and Amish Linklater, who is basically a villain in the series for the first season. Music by Jeff Russo. Production companies are 26 Key Productions, the Donners Company, Bad Hat Harry. This is the only season that Bad Hat Harry actually is part of the production crew. Kinberg genre, Marvel Television, and FX Productions. Genre is drama, psychological thriller, science fiction, superhero. Is a big hodgepodge of whatever, because this is a very confusing series. The running time is 44 to 68 minutes per episode. They were never quite. Some of these episodes, like, is this ever going to end?
Right.
Yeah. But anyway, and it aired originally from February 8th to March 29th, 2017. What it's about. David Haller is a young man who was diagnosed with schizophrenia at a young age and has been a patient in the various psychiatric hospitals since the diagnosis in his teens. He was committed to the latest facility known as Clockworks by his adoptive sister, Amy Haller. The show opens with David being interrogated by officials of the agency Division 3 who believe he may be one of the most or the most powerful mutant, someone possessing a genetic trait that gives them superhuman abilities ever discovered. He explains that he was diagnosed with schizophrenia when he was young and became increasingly troubled while growing up. Pardon me. Caught in my throat. There we go. He eventually attempts suicide and was taken to Clockwork Psychiatric Hospital as a result of this. He also starts to remember unexplainable incidents, such as a time where an entire kitchen explodes around him. But he's been at Clockworks for 6 years, and he was recently visited by his sister Amy, who believes that he has much improved and might be ready to leave. However, a new patient, Sid Barrett, arrives at the hospital. She refuses to be touched by anyone, but agrees to be David's girlfriend, and they start spending all their time together, which is kind of odd. How do you be someone's significant other without touching them, right?
True.
But, it is what it is. But for whatever reason, Sid is about to become discharged from the hospital, and when they get her ready to leave, he decides to kiss her goodbye. When he touches her, their minds switch bodies. And Sid, unable to control David's body, loses the stability of his psyche and launches a telekinetic burst out throughout the whole building, which kills several other patients, including David's friend Lenny, and trapping many of the other building's inhabitants within a room that was structurally altered. Meanwhile, David in Sid's body escapes the hospital with a doctor who believed that the doctor believes that he's Sid, and he's trapped in Sid's body and doesn't really understand what's going on because he's never had this happen. So he's like, what's going on? Why am I outside the hospital in this new body? And he's completely bewildered. Soon the effect wears off and the duo switch back. And David, not realizing what has happened, finds himself being chased by two people until he is captured by Division 3. Agents of the latter group attempt to contain David and prevent him from using his powers against them, though he doesn't realize what he can do yet, because he didn't trigger the power before Sid did. The two people that are chasing him earlier, Ptolemy Wallace and the mail carrier Loudermilk, break into the facility that David is being held in along with Sid. The trio, along with others who exhibit unusual abilities, fight off Division 3 soldiers and race down a hill with David in tow. They reach a boat on a beach where Melanie Bird, their leader, offers to take David to safety. That's pretty much the first episode. It goes somewhat slow, but very quickly when they start revealing things. But then it gets weirder. From there,
Yes.
They are taken to Summerland, which is a facility that belongs to Melanie, and it's like a secret conclave for mutant people to learn how to use their abilities. The facility helps mutants in training and controlling their powers, as well as protect them from Division 3, which they claim is a government agency that hunts mutants down. So David begins a process known as memory work, wherein he and the team, Melanie and Sid and Ptolemy, enter his mind to relive his childhood memories, aided by Ptolemy Wallace's mutant ability, which is to be a memory artist, where he can go into your mind and conjure up a virtual reality around you from your memory. And he actually has total recall himself, so he helps you recall all of the memory, even the stuff you don't think you remember. The process involves David facing many challenges from his memories, including feeling haunted by a children's book that his father read to him, The World's Angriest Boy in the World, which is a hell of a name for it.
It's a disturbing story too.
Yes, it is. In which the title character murders his mother. Patanomy transfers him out of those memories, revealing that Patanomy remembers everything even before he was born, like when he was in the womb and stuff. Later, Sid apologizes to David for the chaos in Clockworks and accidentally killing Lenny, his friend, who, in the telekinetic burst, they find the body of Lenny half embedded in a wall. So it's like the front half of the body is like in the wall, half smushed against the wall, and the rest of the back is like in the other side of the wall.
Mm-hmm. Quite the sight.
Yeah. You aren't surviving that.
No.
So, he's a little bit depressed that you killed my friend. But Lenny's a very important character, as it turns out. David is then subjected to an MRI scan with the supervision of Carrie, the male one, Loudermilk, a mutant who coexists in one body with his younger sister, also named Carrie, played by Amber Midthunder. The team delves into more of David's memories, which include David and Lenny using drugs and a fragmented meeting with the psychiatrist, Dr. Henry Poole. During this scan, David hears his sister Amy calling for him, and he realizes that this voice actually belongs to a present-day event and not a memory. And he realizes that Amy is at Clockworks drawing attention to herself because he's trying to find her brother who's missing, and Division 13 abduct her and try to use her as bait to try to get him to come out into the open. David rushes to Clockworks and tries to physically contact Amy, and she appears to hear him as well in her mind, but he's not really there. He's still stuck in the MRI machine. When Carrie leaves the room, David then sees this entity called the Devil with Yellow Eyes, which is an interesting character in and of itself, and it reveals to be someone else later on. But this is an interesting new character development. Is this a demon that's haunting him? Is this something else? In his panic, he accidentally teleports the MRI scan outside of Summerland, destroying it. And now he didn't destroy himself in the process. We don't know, but he does. He doesn't hurt himself. He just takes the machine, and the whole machine is just outside the building because he's trying to get himself to Amy. Because he has to get to Amy, he prepares to leave Summerland, only to be stopped by Sid, who convinces him to stay and learn to control his powers, stating that Division 3 is not going to do anything to her. They want you. They're going to keep her safe and sound until they can get you, at least. Therefore, Amy finds herself in an undisclosed location where a Division 3 agent known as the Eye begins to interrogate her and try to figure out if she knows where David is. Back to Summerland, during another vision of semi-work, Patanomy and Melanie relived this kitchen incident where David was at a girlfriend's apartment that he shared with his then girlfriend. And they go back a few minutes before the event, and they find that the event was caused by David when he was caught by his girlfriend Philly using drugs with Lenny in the living room. But the memory is disrupted when David sees the Devil with Yellow Eyes, and Patanomy and Melanie are surprised because they can't see the Devil with the Yellow Eyes, and they don't understand that's what part of what triggers the event of the explosion in the kitchen. And then they are suddenly teleported out of the memories, and they wind up in a completely different room of Summerland, teleported away from the room where they were working, which is another accidental display of one of David's powers. Later, while undergoing a different scan, he is haunted by a memory where he sees the title character from The World's Angriest Boy in the World when he was young. He then hallucinates an encounter with Lenny, who taunts him about his sister's status as a abductee of Division 3. But he is taken out of the hallucination when Sid enters the room to help David, and his powers cause him to teleport both of them out of the room. And they appear as astral projections in a different room where Amy is being questioned by the eye. The eye appears to see them, but they vanish before he can touch them. After they return to Summerland in their regular bodies, Melanie states that the eye is a mutant named Walter, and that was Amish Linklater, the guy I mentioned who was the main villain, who co-founded Summerland with her and her husband Oliver years ago, but he was let go after they saw a destructive side to his personality. Ptonomy finds himself unable to get the group out of David's mind, however, and they're trying to find a way out of David's old childhood home when Sid is chasing after a child version of David as he tries to flee from the devil with yellow eyes. Sid manages to wake up in the real world and also wakes up Ptonomy, but they're unable to wake David or Melanie. Melanie wanders through the house and is about to get attacked by the devil with yellow eyes when she wakes up in a panic. But David, still unable to wake up, is tormented by voices, kind of like trapped in a, what would you call it? Chris? Just like a dark room with all the voices around him and some people screaming at him, or what?
Yeah, that's a good description.
Okay. This is where they close another chapter of the events, and then they cut to a narrator in an undisclosed location who welcomes the audience, stating that the intention is to show a 5-act story that encapsulates fear and empathy. I don't know about this, but it's a lot more than 5 acts. The man turns on a film projector, also revealing that his location is a set inside of a giant ice cube. Or is it a giant ice cube? It might be actually a small little ice cube inside of a drink. Your perceptions may be whatever they are. With David, played by Dan Stevens, still trapped inside of his own mind, the team concludes that he created an astral plane that blends reality and fantasy. To find more about him, they check his psychiatrist's office, the one that they were talking to with in his memories, which shows evidence of a struggle and a destroyed tape recorder. Ptonomy suspects that David may have just done this and attacked Dr. Poole while trying to destroy the recorder, but Sid refuses to agree and doesn't think that's what happened. Meanwhile, still imprisoned by Division 3, Amy communicates with an inmate through the cell's wall. The inmate is Dr. Kissinger, David's doctor at Clockworks, who denied that David was ever there or that Kissinger ever existed. Amy states that David often acted strange, displayed supernatural abilities, such as appearing in different places and claiming their voices. And David often talked with imaginary people, including someone known as King. Kissinger believes that it refers to his dog until Amy explains that they never owned a dog. It turns out the dog is an illusory memory representing another entity. Wait for it, though, because it's a big reveal. Cut to Melanie. She decides.
Unless you're a comic book fan, and then you know who it is.
Well, not necessarily a comic book fan. You have to be a really good X-Men fan to know what this is, because
yes,
even though the character is a big X-Men villain, unless you know the Legion storyline from the New Mutants, and not everybody who was an X-Men fan was a New Mutants fan, you don't necessarily know this storyline, so you may not know who this character is. Anyway, Melanie decides to visit a cryogenic room where her husband Oliver lays frozen inside of a diving suit, which is kind of weird, to say the least. This show has a lot of weird stuff going on in it, but she believes her visions may indicate that he'll wake up, but Carrie is not convinced. On the astral plane, however, David is following a man in a diving suit who climbs into the ice cube. And they go climb up into the ice cube, and inside the cube, he takes off the diving suit, revealing himself to be the narrator and, in fact, Oliver himself. He's been trapped in the astral plane for years, over 2 decades, actually, using the ice cube to save himself from a monster, which he describes as a parasite inside David's mind. He allows David to leave the cube to go find the parasite and go fight the parasite. That because now he knows there's something. Oh, that's what's wrong with me. It's not that I'm sick or that I'm schizophrenic. It's like a parasite I have to get rid of. Not quite, but we'll get there. But Ptolemy, Sid, and Carrie delve more into David's real life, and they visit Philly, David's ex-girlfriend, and Ptolemy enters her memories while seeing memory of a talk between David and Dr. Poole. His memory is glitched by the image of a lighthouse. And he realizes that her memory's been altered. Before leaving, he questions Philly, who states that she tried to help David for his drug addictions. And she reveals that David had a friend named Benny, not Lenny, but Benny, whom he used drugs with. She warns them that they are watching, meaning she knows that there's some Division 3 around. So they conclude that someone altered both her and David's memories and replaced Benny with Lenny. So the next thing they do is the three of them, and the two of them and the female Carrie visit Dr. Poole, who lives in the lighthouse. However, Poole turns out to be Walter, and the team is ambushed by Division 3 agents. Now, Walter knocks Ptolemy out, and Carrie gets captured, but Sid switches bodies with Walter with a touch and knocks Walter out in her own body. So the body of Sid is knocked out, but Walter's in Sid's body, and Sid's in control of Walter's body. Just to make that clear for people, because it gets kind of confusing when she switches bodies.
Clear as mud.
Yeah. As agents arrive, Sid, as Walter orders to put the group in the vans, that he's going to take them, drive off with them. So he's going to help them escape, more or less. But back in the astral plane, David is taunted by Lenny, who shows him an image from the real world where the three of them are captured and in the van. And this angers David, who finally breaks out of the astral plane, wakes himself up, and transports himself into the road in front of Sid driving the van in Walter's body, and causes her to crash the van. He frees the team, but Sid gives chase to Walter until she's stopped by David. Then they morph back to each other's bodies, and David realizes, because they don't just switch minds, they actually switch places, so to speak, when they switch bodies. And so after morphing back into her body, David sees Walter shoot Carrie, the female Carrie, in the shoulder before he escapes. And in Summerland, the male Carrie collapses from the effects of the shot because they are linked as one shared body. So they race back to Summerland and try to take care of female Carrie and get the wound until she's waking up and she can be reabsorbed into his body. David shows Sid that he created an illusion where both of them can spend time together and not worry about her powers causing the change effect, body switch effect, because they'll be on the astral plane and not actually physically touching. And David tells Melanie he intends to leave the next day to rescue his sister, who was still abducted by the Division 3, and explains that he also met Oliver in the astral plane. And that's when Melanie explains that he's been in that suit for over 20 years and asks David to help him return to the real world. Motivated by Lenny's psyche in his head, he leaves for Division 3 earlier than he told everybody he was going to do, and he does it alone. Sid asks the team to help her, but Ptolemy doesn't see the point because David's so powerful he doesn't need their help. But Melanie affirms that they're going to help him anyway, because even though he's more powerful than everything they've ever known, they might have something up their sleeve at Division 3. We need to have his back. So they arrive at Division 3's hideout to find all the soldiers have been massacred and the compound has been raided. The team finds a dying agent named Brubaker, who tells them that David left already with Amy. Through security footage, they watch in horror as David brutally kills all the soldiers at the compound. It's just like finger point explode.
Yeah, he in fact did not need help.
No, well, not only does he not need help, it's just horrifying.
Yes,
and it makes you wonder: is this really David doing this? Because it doesn't seem like a behavior. Yes, he's angry at his sisters in the been abducted and is a prisoner, but there's nothing demonstrating her to be in any imminent danger either, per se.
No.
She's just, they're not harming her per
There's
se.
also nothing to this point portraying David as, a brutal killer.
Right, exactly. But this is this. So it's
Yeah.
like, wow, what's going on here? So it kind of gives you a hint that there's something more going on, but not enough, in my opinion, to really reveal what's going on.
Did you lose your place? Did you freeze up?
Okay. And that this devil feeds off of David's mind and powers. Sid is then suddenly teleported back to their astral room, David's astral room, before departing once again to the real world. And she deduces that David is located at his childhood home. As they leave Summerland, however, or not Summerland, but the Vision 3 headquarters, the only survivor of the massacre, Walter, follows them. They go to David's childhood home, and Amy is there, but Amy is tormented by Lenny while David asks to know about his past. Amy somehow can see Lenny. We don't know why, because Amy doesn't have psychic abilities or anything, but she's there. Amy reveals that David was adopted, but doesn't know who his real parents are. The Summerland team enters the house, which appears to remove sound as they wander through the house. They can't figure it out what's going on there. Sid eventually finds Amy, but gets confronted by Lenny, who restores the sound and taunts her before disappearing. Walter then enters and shoots at David, prompting him and Sid to vanish into their astral room. David feels powerless and unable to think about what's happening. The devil in yellow eyes appears and attacks Sid. And in order to save her, he wills himself, the whole team, and Walter into yet another astral plane where they are all patients at Clockworks, and their psychiatrist is revealed to be Lenny. Now, what's actually going on is they're all in one room. Walter is shot at Sid and David, and they've got bullets slowly moving towards them through increments of time. Melanie is frozen in time watching all of this, and Ptonomy and Oliver are trapped in a different room somehow. So now, in their minds, they're at the Clockworks. Melanie struggles in letting go of her husband, who, for all intents and purposes, should be dead, even if he is on ice for 20 years.
Right.
Ptonomy is haunted by the memory of his mother's death, which he saw at a very young age. The two Carries open up about their body sharing experience because Carrie doesn't age. The younger one, the female, does not age while she's inside the male version, and he's usually the one that's out because he doesn't go back inside of her. She always goes inside of him and stuff. So it's like he's in his 50s and she's in her early 20s because of that. It's kind of a weird thing. Walter talks about feeling slower than common people, and Sid struggles with her perceptions of reality as well. As Sid wanders around the hospital, it is revealed that Amy is now a nurse working at Clockworks, and David is also a patient, but like the rest of the team, is completely unaware of the nature of the hospital. Then they start reenacting parts of David's life at Clockworks with small differences. And Sid realizes that this isn't quite right and starts questioning the veracity of the surroundings around her, and her real memories start to come back. However, Lenny decides to use music therapy and place her in a coma with headphones with the music to prevent her from warning anybody else, and locks her in David's childhood bedroom. While sleeping, Carrie is visited by Oliver in a diving suit, who then takes him to the astral plane, vanishing from and Carrie vanishes from Clockworks because he's left Clockworks. This freaks out the younger Carrie because she's trying to find her brother, and Walter is now stalking her because that's what he does. He's a stalkerish, creepish freak guy. Oliver also visits Melanie and guides her to David's childhood home where their bodies remain frozen in time and shows her what's actually going on. And then Oliver disappears and instructs Melanie to save David and Sid from the bullets because they're going to get hit by by Walter's bullets. Melanie struggles in trying to move them from their positions in space and time. And then suddenly the wall reveals two glowing yellow eyes staring at her. And that is, of course, the demon with the yellow eyes launching an attack. David confronts Lenny for answers on Sid's disappearance, and then Lenny taunts David, revealing that she met his biological father and suggests they should team up to reach their power potential, revealing herself to be a form of the devil with yellow eyes and not his former friend. Deeming himself too weak to help her, Lenny then locks David inside a casket inside of his own mind to be forever buried inside. And she takes up, then she's going to just kill the rest. Meanwhile, in David's childhood bedroom, the man in a diving suit takes off Sid's headphones and wakes her up. And then he reveals himself to be Carrie in the suit, not Oliver. The devil with yellow eyes in the form of Lenny starts questioning Amy about her childhood as well as David, things about David. And basically, the devil wants to know more about David's father, but also notes that Carrie, Bill Irwin, played by Bill Irwin, has freed himself from the hospital and says, I wonder where he's off to. Oliver has guided Carrie back to the astral plane, taking him back to the ice cube, and explains that the parasite that torments David is a mutant called Amal Farouk, also known as the Shadow King. And this is the preeminent villain and one of the character that the doctor thinks is the dog.
Right.
And,
bum, bum, bum.
Yeah. And what it is Farouk has locked David inside his own mind, and Farouk's trying to take over David's body and fully possess the body. Carrie then recalls that his body in real life holds a device that could prevent Farouk from taking over David's body, but he needs the whole team back in their respective bodies to get to it. Using Oliver's diving suit, he wakes up Sid, like I said, in her coma and clockworks, and takes her to the astral plane to explain his plan. She's instructed to go back and save the team and receive special glasses from Oliver to help differentiate the reality from fantasy. Melanie does reach the real world, where their bodies are stuck in time. She meets with Carrie and Oliver, who do not recognize. Oliver doesn't recognize her, though. He pretends that he doesn't, or he doesn't. We're not really sure. Trapped inside his mind in the form of a coffin, though, or casket, David is helped by a different iteration of his mind, who helps him understand his history with Farouk, and that David's biological father was a powerful mutant who defeated Farouk in the past on the astral plane. Thus, Farouk lost his body, and in order to protect David, his father put him in foster care, but Farouk eventually found him and put his mind, his psyche, into the infant David. Farouk intends to possess his body to get revenge at David's father and eventually conquer the world. With this knowledge, David then breaks out of the casket and starts wandering throughout his mind, trying to find a way out and come back to the frozen time reality. Sid returns to Clockworks with the special glasses, which prevents her from seeing the hallucinations of that particular astral plane. She eventually finds Carrie, but they're both attacked by Walter. Farouk in Lenny's form approaches them and mutilates Walter, who also dies in the real world as a result. Good riddance. That character is very creepy. The actor does a really great job playing that character. Don't get me wrong. It's just that he's not a very likable character. Seeing that Oliver's protecting David and Sid in the real world with a shield, Farouk leaves Clockworks to knock Oliver out and returns to Clockworks to finish killing Sid and Carrie. Oliver phases out while Walter's bullets continue to approach David and Sid, prompting Carrie to put a device on David's head. This breaks David free from his mind and the hallucination before the whole team returns to their respective bodies in his childhood home. And because he's free of this, he actually uses his telekinesis to catch the bullets in midair with his hands while Walter's body just mutilates itself like in his Death in Clockworks. So everybody is safe, so to speak. And they return to Summerland with Carrie explaining that the device will lock Farouk away inside David's mind. And Melanie also discovers that Oliver has finally left the astral plane and is back in his body, although he still seems not to remember her, which could be part of the fact that he's been locked in the astral plane for so long or whatever. But it's just kind of, I don't know. It's almost like he's playing with her, just to mess with her mind. And it makes me wonder about some things at that point. Did you get this far, David or Chris?
No, I did not get this far, but I'm like all into the story now.
Okay, good. All right. Amy also apologizes to David for not telling him about his real father, which means she did actually remember that who his biological parents was, even if she didn't really know them. She remembers seeing them and that they existed, at some point. As the team attempts to remove Farouk from David's mind, Division 3 agents storm Summerland and corner them, led by the interrogator, Clark, is actually his name. And Clark orders his agents to kill everyone but David. But inside David's mind, Farouk is seen trapped inside the casket the way David had been, screaming and pounding on the casket, and then the casket suddenly cracks. Flashback to the escape from Division 3, originally, from earlier in the season. The interrogator, Clark, survives the explosion that Sid used to get David out of the facility, and he's put into a coma. He wakes up and leaves the hospital, but he's severely burned all over his body, and he wants to return to the field for Division 3, but they've got him basically working a desk because he looks like Two-Face, basically. Kind of. Yeah. I mean, it's actually, I can't remember if his whole face is messed up. It might be his whole face is messed up and it's half of his body. But anyway, he's severely burned everywhere. He is eventually allowed to return to the field where he leads a D3 team to Summerland. And Clark ambushes the group, but David uses his powers to pile the soldiers up telekinetically without any effort. And Clark is then abducted and placed in custody of the Summerland people, while his superiors at D3 decide to wait to see what happens before they deploy more forces, thereby revealing that they can see everything that's going on through a camera in Clark's prosthetic eye on the face that's burned. Okay? As the group needs to take Farouk out of David's mind before it takes over his body, they subject him to a test in the lab as David's condition and Farouk's conditions are worsening. And Sid is transported to the astral room by Farouk, realizing that he is becoming weaker. Farouk warns Sid that if she doesn't help him escape David's mind, David will not survive the extraction at the lab. Sid tells Clark about Farouk, hoping that they can team up to stop him, but Melanie doesn't trust Division 3, and she leaves Clark's detainment room, showing footage of the Shadow King influencing her, which surprises Clark and his superiors. The latter demands to what they call the Equinox. As a last resort, Sid enters the lab and kisses David, which transfers Farouk from David to her body, and then Farouk then transfers from Sid to Carrie, who then in turn attacks the team using her martial arts skills. David confronts Farouk, and they both collide with enough force that it expels Farouk out of Carrie's body, but that's just as Oliver opens the door, and he's thrown back by the the astral entity of Farouk's force, and he ends up being possessed by Farouk. And everybody's more or less out cold by the vets. With no one noticing, Farouk leaves Summerlin and Oliver's body. David regains consciousness and talks with Clark, who agrees that Summerlin and Division 3 now need to work together because Farouk has escaped and he's the danger. After awaking Sid, the team realizes that Farouk has escaped Oliver's body. And they're like, well, okay, that we've got to reset everything and work together now. So that night, David and Sid are talking on a balcony outside on the Summerlin compound when they're interrupted by the arrival of an odd drone-like circular device. Somehow this device scans David and then digitizes him and absorbs him back into the device and traps him inside it and floats off. And David screaming in the thing, pounding on the camera glass of the drone, screaming for help, with Sid racing back inside to try and get help. What a season. Right.
Yeah. And as I said to you off camera, this show is not for the casual viewer. There are so many plots and subplots and twists and just it's insane. And half the time you have to ask yourself, what in the hell is going on?
Yep. So, what did I think of this? Well, what I thought was, I didn't know what to expect when I started this. I've never been a fan of that character of Legion, which is why I waited well after the show originally aired to bother to even try to watch this show, because I was just like, I really don't like Legion. I'm not going to like this show. No, I don't want to watch this show. But, people have been asking me for a long time to cover more Marvel stuff. And I'm like, well, okay, I can get this free from the library. I can try it, right?
Right.
But the truth is, Noah Hawley really does a great version. There's a lot of mystery and intrigue throughout the season, and there's always more twists and turns in David's history, like you say. The cast of characters are really well done, so much so that nearly all the other Summerland mutants are more interesting in terms of their abilities and powers than David is. And David's supposed to be the most powerful of all of them. That tells you something. And that is done in part by design, I think, because if they actually depicted David fully like he's presented in the comics, he would basically dwarf every other power and every other character. You'd be like, why does he need to have an ensemble?
Exactly, yeah. And the show would be like 2 seasons.
Well, less than that.
Or, I mean, it would be 2 episodes. The season would be 2 episodes.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. But anyway, they do show enough of David's power to infer this, but they do make him one mistake that's going to catch up on the series later, and that is David's powers are supposed to be such that different personalities have different abilities, much like the Crazy Jane character from the Doom Patrol series that we reviewed a couple weeks ago. And they don't do that. They just do David, and then there's like multiple versions of David, but they're not David.
Right.
And that I think is kind of a mistake in my opinion. And I'll talk about why later on.
I was going to ask, do you think that's from a budgetary constraint or?
It could be, but I think it's more because of just the story that they're trying to tell lends itself more to having David be a singular focal character.
Good point.
Which will also be explained more in season 2 and season 3, but we'll wait until we get to the point where things really turn. But for whatever reasons, Howley did decide not to go in that direction, and I think it's partly because it would be confusing to have Dan Stevens also trying to play multiple personalities amidst the larger cast of characters. But it does create significant discrepancies later in the storyline. But in season 1, it's not that big of a deal. Okay, it's just a thing I noticed.
Yeah.
The rest of the cast is great. Rachel Keller is Sid Barrett, is very close to playing Rogue, the X-Men Rogue, in her power set, because even though she doesn't have flying powers or super strength, the idea of don't touch me, I don't, and it's body swapping instead of Rogue absorbing your knowledge and your persona into her own psyche. It's very similar in nature, and it kind of gives David and Sid that forbidden thing, and you can play with that with Rogue and see how Rogue should have been played, which she was never played as in any of the movies.
Exactly.
And I thought that was a really good thing.
That was incredibly well done. Incredibly well done.
Patanomy, the memory
artist.
Thank you. Couldn't think of the word. Memory artist. Is one of the most unique characters I've ever seen. I mean, that was really inventive and creative character. Really like him. And the Carrie, the C Carrie, I call him CK Carrie. The duo is brilliant. I love those two as a duo. They really have a good chemistry together, even though you can tell they don't want the chemistry and they're kind of at odds with each other. You can tell they love each other as brother and sister as well.
Mm-hmm.
Just really, really well done. And the characters are also, unique under themselves and worthwhile characters as individuals as well. So that was really well done. And the audience should have no problem finding a reason to like all of these characters. There's something to like in all of them. But that can change as the series progresses.
Right.
And I love the... Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead. I was going to say, if you're watching this series as an even like mid-level fan of X-Men and comics, you're going to get excited because you'll be like, oh my God, that's the freaking Shadow King. And, just because you know the character. And even if you're familiar with the character from X-Men, the animated series, and his relationship with Storm and Professor X, you kind of get excited. You're like, oh my God, they're going to delve into the Shadow King. That's freaking awesome.
Yeah, I love that part too. When they and the thing is, I did not think of Shadow King for the dog. It did not click with me on that at first. The man with the yellow eyes, I was like, the devil with the yellow eyes. Well, it's kind of like Shadow King, but it doesn't really look like him.
Well, the visage for me that they showed, the character that they showed, that kind of almost clicked instantly. Those eyes like clicked for me, to where I'm like, oh my God, is that? And then I had to go look into it and all that stuff. And yeah, sure enough.
Well, see, I was like, the yellow eyes give it away, so to speak, but it's like the actual body of the I guess you want to call it the horrific version, the devil version of him. Really, it was like, yeah, it could be, but if it is, it's kind of a cruddy design, So I was kind of like, nah, I want to see the real Shadow King if they're going to do the real Shadow King. Right. And then they brought him in, and really brought the real Shadow King in with the actor, and the actor is perfect for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Naveed Nebergagan, I think is his last name, but that guy, I'm like, please bring him back. Again, as this character. Let's revisit this character. But anyway, I really did enjoy the first season. I didn't expect to. I gave it 4.5 out of 5. What did you give it for what you've seen the first season so far?
I'm going to give it a 4 just because it really was hard to follow. For me, anyway.
To be fair, Chris has only seen half of season 1.
Yeah.
He hasn't So once he starts seeing more of the reveals, I think he might go a little bit higher.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. Yeah, just from what I saw, it was just there was so much going on. It was just it was hard to follow for me.
Yeah.
Um, and I have to mention that the character model they used for the Shadow King,
Hmm.
did that give off um oh my goodness, what's his name? The big yellow blob that has the video
Mojo.
Mojo. It almost gave off Mojo vibes.
Okay. Eh, I didn't see that either. I was actually seeing more of the big fat blob from the original Dune movie from the 80s.
Oh, okay. I can see
That
that.
Yeah, it was kind of like that, but kind of not. It was its own thing, but I think they drew from a lot of different things to kind of hint at different things, and you can see all of what we've discussed in there. So I can see that.
And the one thing that I absolutely loved was I was really invested in David and Sid's relationship.
Yeah.
I thought that was incredibly well done. And there's a point where David and Sid are talking about him going into her body,
Hmm.
and he decided to explore.
Hmm.
And Sid says, she basically says, "It's okay. It's not my body. I've come to terms with that."
Hmm.
And I think that's really poignant
Hmm.
for what happens later on in the series.
Yes. That's that. Oh wow! Thank you for mentioning that scene. I didn't think about that. Repeat that. Repeat that again.
When David went to kiss Sid and went into her body, he explained to her that he explored. And they kind of giggled about it, and she basically says, "It's okay because it's not my body. I've come to that, realization. I'm okay with
Hmm.
that."
Hmm. Okay.
And
Yeah.
because of things that we've talked about that happen later on, I think there's a really poignant scene.
No, that is a very poignant scene, and we will get to that. Because when he says explore, for those who don't get it, that means sexually explored the body because he never touched the
Yes,
woman before. Just,
yes.
just, just, just to be clear on that. But okay, let's go ahead and move on to season two. Developed by Noah Hawley, directed by Noah Hawley, Nathaniel Hepburn, Tim Millatz, Anna Lily Amarpour, Sarah Adina Smith, Ellen Kuras, John Cameron, Charlie McDowell, Jeremy Webb, Dana Gonzalez, and Keith Gordon. As you can see, there's a whole bunch of new directors in this, or yeah, directors and different writers. Noah Howley teamed up with Noah Hepburn, and Howley with Jordan Frere. And this is the one thing that's good about season two. It's almost all Howley, with just a couple of people co-writing some of the episodes. So it's very um, on track throughout the whole arc. Based on stories, of course, by Claremont and Sienkiewicz, executive producers. Um, this time, Bryan Singer is no longer involved because Singer got kicked out of the X Troop by that point. So executive producers are Noah Hawley, John Cameron, Lauren Shula Donner, Samuel Kinberg, Blackman Loeb, Corey, Fine, Lee Casada, and Zurich, with producers Brian Leslie Parker and Regis Kimball.
Did Singer get kicked out, or did he voluntarily leave?
I I thought he was kicked out. I could be mistaken, but I think
Oh, no, I was just curious. I wasn't sure. I didn't know about like he was actually kicked out.
yeah, I think he was forced out of it.
Okay.
If I Either that or something happened with the family and he had to bow out. It's one of the two.
Okay.
But anyway, if I'm mistaken, if somebody's watching, let me know.
Yeah, if you're in the comments, sound off.
Yeah. But anyway, of course, Bad Hat Harry leaves. as the production company. So it's all the same production companies other than Bad Hat Harry, which is no longer involved. Same situation as far as genre and running times. And it's released from April 3rd to June 12th of 2018, almost a year. It seems like 6 months to a year later.
Mm-hmm.
At the conclusion of season 1, Farouk has escaped inside the body of Oliver and has also taken the mental construct of Lenny with him. And David has been captured and taken away inside of a drone away from Summerland. Months have passed, almost over a year, since David's abduction, and Summerland and Division 3 have resolved to work together under the threat of what they think Farouk might do, because they believe him to be the evil that was inside David and a threat to the world's existence. Oliver and Lenny are then depicted relaxing in a pool, but they realize that they're trapped. They're trapped in the mind of Amul Farouk, who in turn has taken over Oliver's body inside the real world. And Farouk's plan Farouk's plan is to relocate his original body and reemerge his psychic self to it and regain his full power before unleashing hell on Earth. Meanwhile, after months of searching, Division 3 has located and freed David from his captors, but have placed him under a quarantine until they can determine his status, both physically and mentally. Carrie manages to wake him up from his coma, and while eating with Patanomy, David is told that Summerland now works with Division 3 in the shared goal of capturing Farouk, because they're convinced now that most mutants aren't a threat to the world. Which, I don't know about that, but whatever.
Yeah.
It's all, and even David's like, I don't know if this doesn't sound quite right, but okay. Their new boss is named Admiral Fukuyama, who basically walks around with a giant basket placed over his head. It's a wicker basket. It's like,
which is comical. Yeah, I saw pictures. Yeah, it's comical.
Well, it's not just that it's comical. It reminds you of what's the character with the triangle head from the video games?
Oh, Pyramid Head.
Pyramid Head, yes. That's what I'm thinking. My gosh, Pyramid Head's earlier. That's not good. But anyway, he reconciles with Sid, who informs him that he was missing for almost an entire year. Unknown to the others, however, David hears many other versions of himself speaking inside his head. Again, different versions of himself, not other personas. This is important. And I don't like it this way, but this is what they've done. For the past year, Division 3 has tried to locate Farouk, recognizing that he has possessed Oliver's body. However, with each encounter, the team finds that Farouk either infects people with a psychic virus called the Catalyst that paralyzes their bodies and causes their teeth to continuously chatter. They just stand there like the little chatter machines.
Like Chatterer from Hellraiser.
Yeah, exactly. And that's all they do. There's nothing, there's nothing to them but that. After talking with Clark from D3, who is not particularly fond of David, of course, David talks to Admiral Fukuyama and realizes that, I can't read Fukuyama's mind. It must be the wicker basket. But Fukuyama instructs David to meet with Carrie, who created an amplification chamber, which is like a water deprivation chamber, basically, that will help him relive his memories and try to find Farouk, who wants to find his original body, unleash his powers, etc. Inside the chamber, however, once he goes into his session, he finds himself in a nightclub meeting Lenny and Oliver. And he relives the memory of a monk and then starts engaging in dance battles with Lenny and Oliver, which is funny as hell. It's like, what?
Right. Is this Bollywood?
Yeah, it's a very Bollywood type thing going on in a way. After leaving the chamber and meeting with Sid, he gives her a compass that says it'll always lead her to him, promising not to keep any more secrets between them. Yeah, right. But But it's revealed that after David was trapped in the orb, he met a future version of Sid. And that version of Sid can't talk. And using a light wand, that version of Sid explains that Farouk wants to find his body and that David has to help Farouk, not stop him. This confuses David just as that version of Sid disappears. While in the present, David's mind goes back to the nightclub where he meets again with Lenny and Oliver. Throughout this episode, a new narrator that's kind of like just an omnipotent narrator of sorts. He explains many different concepts. The first involves leading the viewer into imagining a maze and understanding how imagination then becomes an idea. He then talks about Zhuang Zhao, the man who dreamt he was a butterfly, to the point where he forgot about his real identity. He then compares the concept of an idea to an egg, where a rational idea hatches a chick while a delusion hatches a dark creature. He uses the example of Albert A., where he started thinking that his right leg doesn't belong to him, and the delusion where that consumed him, he ends up sawing his leg off. Then they show the dark creature eating the chick, and the narrator notes that delusions grow stronger as rationality dies. This kind of gives you a hint of the foreboding nature of what this season is going to be. As the story progresses, we find David torn between trying to discern what is and isn't reality while trying to determine if the Sid from the future is real and that he should be trying to help Farouk find and merge with his original body, or whether or not he should stop it. Ultimately, he agrees to help Farouk so long as nobody gets hurt. Now, what is this? You kind of like, so long as nobody gets hurt, this is a rule for Farouk. He's been torturing you your whole childhood life.
Right, literally since before birth.
Yes. So why? Well, no, not before birth, but after, while he was still an infant, anyway. But nevertheless, why are you negotiating this? That doesn't make a lot of sense. But it is what it is, and so you just kind of keep going with things. So David, go ahead.
It seems to me that, and this may be because I haven't watched the rest of the series, but it seems like a gaping plot hole that Farouk is immensely more powerful in his astral form than he would be in a physical body. So why is he trying to find a physical body?
The answer to your question there is, even though he is infinitely more powerful in the astral plane, you lose your astral self if you don't have a physical
anchor.
Right.
Okay. That makes sense. Okay.
And since he doesn't have David's body to be an anchor, he has to find his own.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
Okay. And now, even though as I explained, I can explain that because I understand that sort of stuff. But anyway, he agrees to work with him, and he leads part of the team on a wild goose chase to find Oliver and Farouk, only to find that Farouk attacks the Division 3 headquarters and kills many different soldiers, traps Carrie in a room where he is haunted by Lenny, and he incapacitates Carrie at the same time. By the time David and the team returns, they find that Farouk has trapped Carrie inside of male Carrie instead of female Carrie's body, in a reversal of the normal abilities, and that they cannot separate. This is like very body horror type stuff, and it's a precursor to something that's even worse to come. The team concludes that Farouk was looking for a monk member of the Migo order, whom he believes is responsible for hiding his original body. Admiral Fukuyama's bodyguards, the Vermilion, which is a really cool thing in a way. I don't know why they're called the Vermilion, because they have no red. But they're called the Vermilion. They're a group of cybernetic cloned mutant women who all wear mustaches. It is the funkiest thing you've ever seen, but it's cool, in a way. And there's like dozens of them all around the establishment. They suspect that David may be actually in league with Farouk, and responsible for the team being led away and leaving them vulnerable to attack. But both Sid and Melanie reject them and say, "Nah, you're wrong," even though that is exactly what happened. Disturbed by the deaths that he told them, no more deaths, Farouk. He's like, crap, I gotta figure out what's going on here. He asked the two Carries for help and trying to meet with the future version of Sid again to find out what's going on, right? And he goes back into the amplification chamber and he meets with Sid, who tells him that he will kill Farouk within a week, but then a plague will kill all humans on the planet, which is that chitter chatter plague, okay? And it can be prevented if Farouk recovers his body. Mm-hmm. David then confronts Farouk in his original form and they engage in his astral form, and they engage in a wrestling match, which evolves into a mind battle. It comes more or less to a draw, so to speak, and Farouk promises to stop killing everybody as long as David continues helping him in finding his body. Whatever. it's like no. We get this. It's like we're running around in circles here. Come on. David leaves the desert while Lenny fails to convince Farouk to let her go because she's just like a mental entity that was with David and she wants to be with David. And he's like, no, I got plans for you. And Lenny is horrified at that possibility and what could happen because she just saw what happened to the two Carries. Now, male Carrie does eventually manage to exit the female Carrie, although this process is not complete, so to speak, and they are not entirely themselves. And Carrie is now aging rather quickly to catch up to her brother's age, which is not a good thing. Because
that would suck.
Yeah. So David is now talking with Melanie, and she tells him that he must save himself above all things else. Based on this, David tells Sid about meeting her future self and choosing to work to help Farouk. Sid is like, okay, I understand your position. After all, I told you to do it. I wouldn't have told you to do it without a reason, I guess. Type thing. But at the same time, she's like, really? This doesn't sound right either. She's got her doubts. And so they decide that they must figure out what the future Sid meant by finding the monk. And the monk is revealed to be in the room guarding the people infected with the catalyst, but he's not infected with the catalyst himself. And the reason is because, well, the narrator explains the concept of umwelt, or creatures' perceptions of the world. He also states that humans can change the meaning behind their ideas. For an example, a boy is taught by Oliver that red is green color and green is red colored, with green symbolizing go. As a result, the kid walks into a street during a red light, causing him to get hit by a car. That's an example. This is symbolic of both Farouk's plan and what's going on inside David's mind. Is the future Sid real, or is she a construct planted by Farouk that's tricking David, or is there something else even more sinister going on? And the answer is the latter.
Of course.
In the past, the Migo monks retrieve Farouk's body after his original defeat. They bury it in a part of their monastery, although the monks are haunted by noises coming from the body. The Division 3 soldiers discovered the monk was in the same room as the people infected by the catalyst and then walked through the building. As such, the installation is now placed in lockdown. For looking for answers, David visits Lenny, which gets him over to Farouk. Farouk states that the monk was actually an asymptomatic carrier of the catalyst, and even signals that the future version of Sid will stop existing if he changes the future and takes his body back, which will avoid the catalyst plague and the destruction of humanity. So when David goes back to the real world, he finds that the monk has infected everyone except for Carrie, the male version. Discovering an infected Ptonomy, David and Carrie enter his mind. And Ptonomy's mind consists of a maze, which consists of the person experiencing his deepest desire, which in Ptonomy's case is they find him in a garden, gardening, and it keeps clicking back to one perfect moment in memory. so he doesn't remember anything else, which for Patanomy is kind of like a weird, both a deep wish fulfillment because he doesn't want to have the pure recollection of everything he remembered of everything in his existence, but it's also a horrific trap at the same time because it's just that one constant thing over and over.
Yeah, so it's kind of a mix of hell and heaven.
Exactly. So but they do convince to wake him up and freeing him from the virus. Then they go and encounter Melanie, and her mind is consisted of a black room with a computer system. After interacting with her, they manage to get her into the real world. But then they find the monk finds David and takes him to experience the monk's memories at the monastery. And David finds the monastery that through Farouk's body, the monks were all infected by the catalyst, driving some of the monks to suicide. And that's how the catalyst spread, was through that whole situation. Now, the monk in the real world has incapacitated Admiral Fukuyama and uses the vermilion to communicate his intentions. He wants the weapon to kill Farouk once and for all. Melanie deduces that the weapon is David as David walks into the room. But before the monk reveals that David works with Farouk, so he's not the weapon, David teleports both of them, him and the monk, to the top of the building. David tries to explain his reasoning for what's going on. The monk's not going to hear it. And he says, well, rather than let you have me and help Farouk, he jumps off the building to his death rather than have his mind change or anything. So the monk dies. And with the monk's death, the catalyst stops. All the weirdness there ends for some reason. But he infects, David then encounters an infected state and enters her mind. And in her mind, he's walking through a snowstorm towards an igloo. All throughout this narrative of this fight, the narrator is explaining the nocebo effect, where the human body experiences a negative reaction to harm. He also states that this could lead to a contagious state of mass hysteria, highlighting examples of the dancing plague of 1518, the Tanganyika laughter epidemic, and the Ganeshan drinking milk miracle, which is all different things of conversion disorders where the body will respond to an idea of an illness as a real illness, which in and of itself can be contagious. So this is both analogies to both the catalyst and what's going on in David and Sid's minds. And it's also has to do with that black chick eating the baby chick with the delusion versus ideas that has already been explained. Inside the igloo, Sid experiences some of her childhood memories, which include disliking people touching her. It also becomes her, she always disliked it, but she didn't start doing body touching until a teen. This also made her become a victim of bullying from other people, which also led her to self-harm. What's that noise?
Oh, that is Angie getting dog food.
Ah, okay. I want to make sure there's something going on with my program. Anyway, David meets with Sid inside her mind, but she's dismissive of his intentions to help her get back to reality because things aren't right with them right now because of the future Sid thing, David struggles in trying to find what her deepest desire is, and that's the key to sending someone back to reality, because she's not even interested in touching people without worrying about her powers. Just don't care. She shows that her power began to surface when a boy forcefully kissed her and caused her to switch bodies with the boy, and then she used the boy's body to assault several of her female bullies that were nearby before jumping back into her own body and then claiming to witness the boy attack the girls, and then the boy is taken away by the police for his actions. Think about that for a moment. That is pretty wild.
That's
I mean, not only is that forced on her, but then she does what she does, which is malicious in intent, both towards the bullies and towards the guy who kissed her.
You can't blame her, though.
Yeah, but it shows a darker nature to her that we hadn't seen before.
True.
Then it gets revealed that later she swaps bodies with her mother, who's passed out on the couch while her mother's boyfriend is in the shower. And so she swaps bodies with her mother and then goes in her mother's body into the shower and has sex with her mother's boyfriend. Only because she doesn't expect what happened to happen, their bodies accidentally swap back before they're finishing. And now she's in the shower with a boyfriend. And the mother, and she freaks out, and then the mother freaks out. And of course, she calls the police, and the boyfriend's arrested for presuming sex with a minor.
Right. And she does explain, I thought she explained in season 1 that this is because early on, the switch didn't last as long.
Well, it doesn't last long regardless, but she just didn't have concentration at all because she was having an orgasm.
Okay. No, I thought she explained that the switch didn't last as long at first.
Maybe it doesn't, but this is mostly
right.
It was implied because she lost control
Gotcha.
of the focus. But anyway, this begins to show how messed up Sid is mentally overall. And it confuses David because he just can't figure out what her deepest desire is then. And without that, he can't wake her up out of the catalytic state. Back in the real world, Division 3 is cured of the catalyst, with Clark deducing that the monk's death must have had something, or may have had something to do with it. But in Sid's mind, David is constantly failing in realizing her deepest desire, which forces him to relive her life over and over and over and over and over, trying to figure out, get it, have you figured it out yet, stupid? I've got it. No, go back. But no, go back. It is so. He's just like. Finally, she just tells him, "Look, my desire is in you recognizing that whatever this is between us, love, whatever it is not going to save them. That's the first thing." But he posits and he counters her comment and posits that recognizing of one's and others' pain gives you the strength and capacity for love and helps you overcome the adversities. And this is another important point for later in the show. And it also plays into, some of the other things that go on between them. And this does finally convince her to wake up with David in the real world, in which now they discover Division 3 has retrieved a person who is trying to break in their facility. It's Lenny. But wait, wasn't Lenny just a mental construct originally trapped in David and later Farouk's mind? What's going on? After interrogating the new Lenny, who denies being controlled by Farouk, she just wants to talk to David because she believes she knows Farouk knows where the location of his new body is, or his old body is, and wants to help stop Farouk. Somewhere, Farouk, possessing Oliver, has located his body, or we thought was his body, which is actually revealed to be a woman's body, from which he takes a tissue sample. Wasn't he going to merge with the body? No, he's just taking a tissue sample. Interesting. They cut back. Clark is unconvinced by Lenny's, pleas, and he leaves. Autonomy attempts to read Lenny's mind, but finds that her memories have been disrupted and sees a vision of Admiral Fukuyama instead. And David decides, okay, I'll figure it out. And he meets with her and enters her mind, where he discovers that Farouk did in fact send her, but she doesn't realize that he sent her. It's, she's her own person, but, still kind of subconsciously being manipulated.
Right.
She's unaware of it. So he turns around and blocks Farouk's influence over her and more or less frees her from that, which she's grateful for. She states that she's still unsure on how she could have got a new body after she died because, she still remembers being splattered across the wall at Clockworks back from season 1. And so she's like, this isn't my body. This is a new body that belonged to somebody else. And I don't know where they got it. Well, they cut to the desert where it appears that Division 3 has David's sister Amy and her husband in witness protection. Amy tells her husband that she had a dream where she had a mustache while serving a man with a basket over his head, referring to the Vermilion. And her husband's like, you're weird, just whatever. And then she gets visited by Oliver, who claims he will take her to David. Of course, Farouk is in Oliver's body, and we oh shit, what's going on? David then tells Lenny where they buried her body, after they removed remains from Clockworks, the desert. Oh crap. Lenny realizes then that Farouk didn't find his body in the desert. He found hers.
Oh.
The tissue sample was from her. And now we cut back to Amy. Farouk and Oliver's body has located Amy in her hidden location in Division 3. He then kills Amy in order to infuse her body with Lenny DNA, and then body morphs and transforms Amy into Lenny. And puts the mental construct in the new body.
Oh, wow.
And then Lenny wakes up in the desert by herself.
That's some messed up crap.
Very messed up. And then after waking up, she finds a horse, and the horse takes her to the D3 compound where they found her and captured her.
So let me get this straight. She found a horse in the desert. Did the horse have no name?
Yes.
So she's literally been through the desert on a horse with no name.
Exactly. So basically now, and Ptolemy can confirm this because he realizes that he has complete memory. She goes, close your eyes. What color are my eyes? Well, they're brown. Open them. They're blue. Amy's eyes were blue. And that's, oh shit. Yeah, everything. Oh, okay. So this revelation devastates David because Amy is now gone forever. He's lost his sister, which is one of his anchors to reality. And he breaks down and cries in the arms of Lenny, and he swears revenge on Farouk for this. But is Lenny telling the truth? And is the fact that she arrived on the horse another symbol, that of a Trojan horse? We don't know yet. After the revelation of his sister's death, David starts experiencing many different lives of himself, kind of like different personalities or whatever, but they're all of which involving him taking different directions in life, where he takes on different occupations, doesn't do recreational drugs, and other things. In one of these lives, he works in a company where he's astounded that he can hear people's thoughts, and he tells one of the executive people, Laura Mercer, that her business associates are not being fully honest with their deal. And so he tells them what they're thinking about what's wrong with the deal, which is they have some major legal problems coming up if they do this. And the reason they're working for the merger is so that she'll take the hit, more or less. And she basically confronts them and says, we're not doing the deal, which helps save her company, more or less. And ultimately, because she works with him, he becomes the richest man in the world to the point where Laura now works for him. In another life, David is homeless and avoided by crowds, but then one day he's attacked by a group of men, which inadvertently unleashes his powers, and he kills all of them, in which he's pursued by Division 3 and he gets killed by Carrie, the female version. In another version of his life, David works as a warehouse employee, tended to by Amy at home, and is still taking his medication, and he doesn't have his powers. He's just more or less not retarded, but mentally
Challenged.
not challenged. Like a mental fog is over his mind all the time.
Okay.
Because and he's like, I don't want to take the medication. I don't want to take it, but you got to take it. Type thing. But anyway, but then he sees the devil with yellow eyes, which disturbs him, and he's leaving his work, and it's after hours, and Amy's a little late to pick him up, and a police cruiser stops by and passes him, and he says, "You stop. You're not supposed to be here at this time of night." And the police officer gets aggressive. The cops try to arrest him just as Amy arrives, and David unleashes his powers and kills all the cops. And then more officers arrive, and Amy tries to stop them, but they shoot and kill David. And then there's many other lives depicted, including him living in luxurious houses, becoming a drug addict who discusses the multiverse, jumping around and hip hop, flip flop, and stuff going on. Working as a teacher, happily married and becoming a father, working in an office just as an office worker, and even an elderly version of himself. Just cared, he lived his life to senior citizen status, still cared for by Amy. In one scenario, David attempts suicide and he dies, this time with Amy visiting his grave. And it snaps back, and Amy just tries to convince David to seek help by taking him where? The Clockwork Psychiatric Hospital, which he agrees to do because he's like experiencing all these weird things. And like, I guess I'm that screwed up. I guess I need help. At this point, when you go to Clockworks, time stops, and Farouk reveals himself to David and explains that with their powers, they can reconstruct the world as they see fit and that they can reshape reality. And this is all the thing that you've seen is just examples of what could be. But you have control to make it none of those things. You can do it whatever you want. You can only live the life with the life that you can truly imagine. And this gets David back to the real world and accepting what has happened to his sister, although he's still angry as hell at Farouk. Now his persona is darker and more aggressive in nature. And Sid notices this because, it's very aggressive. Like, I don't give a rip about nothing. And this leaves her vulnerable in her psychic connection to him, to Farouk. So Farouk then transports his mind to the future to meet with future Sid to find out why David is helping him. Future Sid reveals that the apocalypse is not caused by Farouk, but David himself, and that she's hoping that by helping Farouk can stop it. Farouk is delighted by this revelation and even suggests they could team up to save the world. He's like, yes, I've been accused of being the bad guy this whole time, and you see, it's the white devil.
Delusions of grandeur.
Yes, it is the white devil, like I always say. Anyway, later David also meets the future Sid, and there's kind of like a tension between them because, of course, the future Sid's met Farouk and he doesn't know that. But he explains he can't help Farouk since he was responsible for Amy's death. And Sid says, yeah, okay, I get it. I understand. And they kiss. And okay, why? But they do, back at the D3 headquarters, Patanomy, however, is haunted by his visions of Admiral Fukuyama, a result of the delusions caused by the dark idea creature the narrator has been telling the audience about all season long, because they actually exist, and it gets in his head, and like the earworms of Star Trek 2, it actually goes and gets inside his ear and sucks into his mind.
Oh, that's cool.
So this also leads him, Patanomy, to inadvertently plant the delusions inside Clark, Sid, Carrot, and the two Carries. So now everyone is convinced that Fukuyama is conspiring against them and is going to kill them all. And this prompts them to lead an attack towards them, which incapacitates the Vermilion. And Sid and Clark reach Fukuyama, which forced him to take off his basket, revealing that he is disfigured. And as they project a dark creature inside their minds, Clark is about to kill him when David teleports in or psychically appears, and he removes the delusions from Sid and Clark and protects Fukuyama. But they turn around and see Patanomy nearby, and a larger delusion breaks out of Patanomy's body, breaking Patanomy's spine and just like a giant one. And the Vermilion take Patanomy's mind and spirit with them and take him into the mainframe that is Fukuyama's mind. And so Patanomy is dead now, the physical form, and he's being put in as in man inside the machine. Okay, that's what's going on at that point. David confronts the delusion, the giant monster delusion, and transports both of them to a red room where David kills it. Patanomy is now trapped inside the mainframe, ghost in the machine, and things are only going to get worse from here. Because it's while inside the mainframe, Patanomy is shown Fukuyama's past. When Fukuyama is a teenager, he was contacted by D3 and acting as a keeper of the secrets. And he had brain surgery, serving as a type of machine that would prevent telepaths from reading minds and discovering vital information. Hacking into the mainframe, Patanomy contacts David through a Vermilion and says he's found the location of Farouk's body in a desert known as Le de Sol, or Le de Soleil. And David leaves for the desert without informing Division 3, but tells Lenny about his intentions. Why he tells her, who knows? But after he leaves, he has Lenny released from her cell, and she leaves on her own accord on a motorcycle. Okay? Farouk is now also pursuing the location of Le de Soleil, following the advice of his old caretaker. Guided by Clark, Sid leaves for that part of the desert as well. Well, the desert turns out to be this ever-changing location where time and space and logic don't apply, with Farouk remaining one day ahead of David, no matter what he does. But David says he has a plan, telepathically communicates with Clark, telling him to find the clock. In other words, what's keeping them one day apart. However, Clark gets knocked unconscious by Melanie, revealing that she is now under Farouk's control because she's trying to get back with Oliver, her husband, and get her husband back, which he's still in control by Farouk. Back in the desert, Farouk summons a Minotaur to help with his mission. The time now loops back 2 weeks, 13 days, and we are revealed how Melanie comes under the influence of Farouk and what David's plan entails. This includes the two Carries absconding with a special weapon from the D3 armory and leaving it in the car trunk outside a restaurant. Lenny, now free from Division 3, returns to her old house where she starts to abuse drugs again with her old friends. But then she's haunted by Amy's spirit, so to speak, who manifests in her mind in Lenny's consciousness and reprimands her for wasting her new body, Amy's body, on drugs. Yeah. Look, you got a second chance, and you're wasting it on this yet. and my brother, your friend is in danger. What are you doing? All right, you're right. Okay, I'll do what you want. So she's, figuring out what to do, and she has a vision. Lenny leaves her house to help David. And she arrives outside the parking lot, outside the restaurant where the two Carries left the car, and enters the car. And Carrie and Carrie are in the restaurant trying to figure out what's going on because they were only told to just leave the car. They don't know enough to plan, right? So they see her walk in and get in the car. What the hell's going on? That's Lenny. What's going on? They rush out of the restaurant, and the car transports, teleports to the desert, okay? Leaving them behind. Well, thankfully, older Carrie left a tracking device on the gun, on the weapon that he left in the trunk, so they can still figure out where to go. Well, we better call D3 and get there. So the car teleports to the desert, and Lenny gets out, and the car starts to burst into flame for some reason. We don't know why. It just does. I guess the teleportation was just too much for it.
Right. One of the dang flammable cars.
Yes. So anyway, she throws her jacket off and she's like ticked off and she starts to walk away from the car. Oh shit! There's something in the trunk. I better get that out. So she races back to the back of the trunk and she's like, "What do I do? What do I do?" She kicks the door of the trunk and it opens up so that she can get it. And the car's on fire and she's like, "Okay, let me get it." So she gets the weapon out of the trunk before the car explodes and starts walking away from the car. With a GPS tracking unit installed in the weapon, the other two are following her, and she doesn't know it. Cut to the desert. Sid exits her tent and discovers a giant plug hole draining the desert ground, which is where because she and David went to the desert trying to find this body, right? Suddenly, she's hit with a rope and dragged down into the hole, and David comes out of the tent wondering where she went. So he's like looking for her, but he doesn't. It's like he doesn't even see this giant plug hole. Now this plug hole is probably, I would say the size of a child's swimming pool.
Oh wow!
So it's not like it's some small thing. It's like
right.
You can't miss it. Type thing. But I don't know where she went. So Sid gets dragged down the bottom of the drain hole, ending in a room where she meets Melanie, who attempts to convince her that she shouldn't trust David, indicating that David may not love her. In the desert, David leaves that behind and goes to the Migo monastery where he finds Farouk in the body of Oliver. And using his powers, he says, "Screw this, I'm going to torture Oliver to reveal Sid's location," which Oliver refuses to disclose, in part because he doesn't know. But, all of this is now seen on camera screens in front of Sid and Melanie, and Melanie's trying to convince Sid that David is the monster, the bad guy. And Sid's not buying. She's "No, I don't buy this." Melanie then attempts to showcase how David is consistently met with Sid's future self and is cheating on Sid with Sid's future self. Okay. So, and the thing is, he already told her that he was kind of messing around with Sid's future self. Well, it's still, I'm not jealous because that's not really, it's still me. It's just another version of me. It kind of goes back to that scene where you were talking about where he felt her up when she was in her body.
Yeah, and she said, "It's not my body anymore."
Yeah. It's the same recurring theme. So she also then shows Sid that David is the reason for the incoming apocalypse and why. While Sid is unaware that Melanie is actually being possessed by Farouk, she doesn't trust Melanie at all because her personality is radically different and more, I don't want to say demonic, but certainly darker and more aggressively toned. But her own jealousy of David, subconscious jealousy of being with future Sid, triggers the release of the Minotaur to hunt and kill David. In the desert, the two carriers arrive with Division 3 operatives at the plug hole. From inside the plug hole, monks then emerge and emit a high-pitched frequency which drives the heroes off because it's, think of it like Banshee Scream or whatever type thing. But, they don't, it's too much pain. They can't really do much of anything. So younger Carrie overcomes the frequency and starts fighting off the monks with martial arts. And she knocks them all down. And she's like, "Okay, I've defeated them all." And now a whole pack of more emerge from the plug hole. And it's clear that only more monks will emerge until Carrie is overwhelmed. With Farouk now leaving Oliver's body, and David has like stabbed Oliver through the leg with, I don't know what it was, a metal rebar or whatever. But he's beaten the living hell out of Oliver. Damn near killed him. David finally gives up on the torture, and that's when Oliver reveals that Sid was with Farouk. And, in the future Sid. version. Clark, the Vermilion, and more operatives have now arrived at the monastery with a giant tuning fork called the Choke. I don't know why they call it that, but that's what they call it. This device will now dampen all psychic powers, rendering them inert. However, Farouk is located in his actual body and abandons Melanie's, finally accomplishing his goal. Back in the plug hole, a monk takes Carrie inside, older Carrie, and younger Carrie decides to go after him, while Lenny stays above, having retrieved the weapon, which is a firearm, which originally looks like a paint gun, but will later be revealed to be able to shift forms. As the Vermilion are now fighting the Minotaur, Carrie escapes, and Carrie, younger Carrie, encounters the Minotaur and fights it with Sid's help. Carrie then discovers David in the throne room and realizes that David has tortured Oliver and acknowledges that Farouk may have found his body already. David's behavior seems to have changed, as David now seems intent on just killing Farouk by any means necessary. Stopping him wasn't enough. Killing him, we got to do. So back outside of the monastery, Clark and the Vermilion try to activate the Choke, but Farouk arrives, knocks out Clark, and causes the Vermilion to retreat by tearing their bodies apart psionically, telekinetically. He uses his powers to throw away the Choke and, like dozens of miles away in the air. And it lands, and then he's like marveling at his own full power. I'm back in my body. I am God type thing. And David suddenly arrives reciting, "The world's angriest boy in the world." And the final battle is on. And they start a mental battle where Farouk seems to overpower David. However, in the distance, Lenny uses the weapon, which is now configured to a long-range sniper rifle, complete with stand, and she's laying belly down on it. I'm aiming. I'm going to shoot this thing. And she hits the Choke from like 200 yards away or something. And so it emits a frequency, and that hits the two of them. And as their powers dissipate, the scene cuts to a 3-year time jump with a glimpse of Oliver and Melanie together, who now live inside Oliver's ice cube together, both noting about how Sid was betrayed by David and how it's a shame. So back to the present. After you see that one's quick cutaway, they're now without their powers, and David brutally attacks Farouk. And David is about to kill him. Sid arrives at the scene, having escaped from the underground. And she confronts David on his perceived darker nature and how he seems to have enjoyed killing many of his enemies. Are you really you? And she pulls out a gun and points it at him. And despite his pleas, she shoots at him. Then the scene jumps to a dream sequence where David winds up in his childhood bedroom, and the narrator explains certain concepts on television. An alternate version of David suggests that the delusion is that David believes himself to be a good person, but he isn't. That's the other David self. Returning to the desert, Sid's bullet is now hit by another bullet shot by Lenny, which causes a weird, energy thing that blows everybody back, okay? And Sid falls back and loses consciousness. David then comes to and comes back to her and alters her memories of everything that has happened while Division 3 agents arrive at the scene to retrieve them, capture Farouk by placing a device on around his head like a crown to stop his powers, which with him being Arabic and everything, it's almost like a Jesus crown type thing going on symbolically. And Lenny is also placed under custody because she escaped from Division 3 and was, not, she's still one of the bad guys, supposedly. So the whole team now returns back to Division 3 headquarters, where David and Sid remain committed in a relationship. But Sid's tired, and she goes to her room and says, "Just leave me alone. I need time to think." And what is going on is her memories are coming back to her. And David realizes that she's going to remember everything. So he jumps out of his body and goes into the astral plane and alters her mind again, and they have sex with David not revealing anything about the events that just took place, or letting her, and just completely mental, mind fucks. This is where you basically realize that David has turned into the baddie himself. Unknown to both of them, Admiral Fukuyama is watching them in the machine somehow. Meanwhile, Carrie creates a device, and he's looking through everything, and he finds out and discovers that the truth of what happened and what David did to her out in the desert. He doesn't know what's going on in the bedroom, but on the desert. He goes, treachery. We've got to stop him. So David thinks everything's cool. Farouk's captured. We're going to end him. We're all good. David goes and visits Farouk in his cell, and Farouk's awaiting execution. And Farouk is totally aware of David manipulating his memories and mocks him for his hypocrisy. And he's like, you don't really think you've won, do you? Yeah, of course I've won. What are you going to do? Everybody, you're about to be on trial. You're about to be executed. Everything's good now. Everything's right now. And he leaves the room, and Farouk's powers slightly manifest because the crown's starting to malfunction. And he restores Sid's memories. Oops.
Whoopsie.
So the next day, David arrives at Farouk's trial. But Farouk's not there. They've got this other thing in the center room. Well, where's Farouk? Well, come forward, David. We need to talk to you. Oh, okay. Vroom. Force field around him. And they trapped him in this force field. And Farouk comes out of the shadows, and the Vermilion accuse him of his future crimes for the potential apocalypse that he will cause, as well as the fact that David just sexually assaulted Sid by erasing her memories and having sex with her. You have a choice. You either take treatment and go back to the psychiatric hospital, effectively surrendering all your powers, or we will kill you. And then alternate versions of David in his mind start appearing, and they mock him. See, you shouldn't have trusted Sid. See. Yeah, and again, it's not the multiple personality disorder. It's all different versions of David. And it's like, I wish he did the different versions of the different characters, but it is what it is. But David proclaims that he's a good person and deserves love. Well, they're not listening because they're like, no, we figured out what's going on now. So he's like, okay, you've all turned them against me. I'm Anakin Skywalker. You turned them against me. You did that yourself. So he goes, well, I'm still me. And he uses his powers to just destroy the force field and teleport and vanish away. And he teleports and finds Lenny in her cell and says, you want to go? Hell yeah. And they leave. And now we know that David is the threat to the world, and it's up to Sid, Farouk, and the rest of the division to stop him. And that's how season 2 ends. Extremely well-written season. Again, almost exclusively written by Hawley and Halpern. And this makes the story a lot better, I think, than having too many writers in the writer's room.
Too many cooks in the kitchen is never good.
Yeah. The directing is quite experimental, however, because many of the directors are having their directorial debuts in this production. And so sometimes some of the editing and cuts feel a little bit uneven, but I don't know if that's by design, because different mindscapes and realities are directed by different people in different episodes. So I can forgive it, I guess you can say, because they do edit it and do it well enough that it does maintain consistency throughout the season. But you can also say, well, yeah, but
this is not the type. This is not the type of show that someone needs to have their directorial debut on.
And almost every single director through season 2 has it. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
But the cast is great. Not a single bad performance in the group. And although you can certainly be annoyed by the characters and their choices of actions throughout the story arc, throughout the season, the reveal and betrayal of David is what is going to be the downfall of the show, in my opinion, however, as we move into season 3. Because you've just spent 2 seasons making him the protagonist, only to now make him the bad guy. And yes, you've done enough to make it so that you're not sympathetic to him because he's done certain evil things that are unforgivable.
Right.
So we understand that. Mm-hmm.
But when you spend all that time getting invested in a character,
mm-hmm.
and then they flip them on you, it tends to piss people off.
Yeah. So, it's like he's just an irredeemable asshole, basically. And you don't want anybody to support at the end. And through the series, it's all David being presented. There's again, none of those other personalities in his head. They don't have any other identity, names, nothing. It's all just David. Why not make the person who manipulates Sid not David, but one of the other personalities?
That would be a good twist.
Why not reveal the whole point of David's multiple personality schizophrenia instead of saying this is just all alternate personalities that are a result of Farouk's presence in his mind? I think that would have been it doesn't give David an out by any means because she was still assaulted, but
gives him a glimmer of being redeemable,
possibly redeemed at some point.
Yeah. Right.
So anyway, the rest of the cast is stellar as always. I enjoy the different trials and tribulations that they have to overcome and overthrow. Especially the 2 Carrie characters. I love how they reversed the merger and all the different things that was going on with them. I really thought that was well done. Turning Patanomy into the Ghost in the Machine was pretty wild. And his character will continue to evolve moving forward in season 3. The body horror reveal between Amy and Lenny, I think, is one of the most shocking and unexpected scenes I've seen in a long time in any show. And that was extremely well done. And David's reaction to that reveal was both heartbreaking and surprising in a way, because given his rage that he has from time to time, you'd think that instead of just breaking down into tears and demanding revenge on Farouk, given what he's done to other people, and he doesn't really, and Lenny's kind of a Faroukian persona,
right?
Why doesn't he just? And that's
you'd think there'd be some sort of psychic backlash or outburst or something, yeah.
And there wasn't, and so that was a little bit of a not a faux pas, because there's a reason for it, but it did stand out to me as something's up.
Now, I have to ask you a question. You talked about the horse being symbolic, possibly like a Trojan horse. What color was the horse?
I don't remember.
Was it a pale horse? White horse?
No. It was brown or black.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. All right.
Now, there are certain things in the show, like the tuning fork known as the choke, the sniper shot skills of Lenny, that are way over the top and make little to no sense. And you just have to ignore the insanity of it and accept it as part of this crazy pseudo realities of this universe. But in retrospect, you just roll your eyes and go, come on, man.
Well, I love the fact that the desert was literally named Les Désolés, which means the desert.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Which also, interestingly enough, I was looking it up, and désolé can also mean sorrow.
Mm-hmm. And
so I don't know if that has anything to do with, Yeah,
there's a lot of sorrow in this because people are losing their loved ones throughout the whole over arc, so to speak.
Right.
But the real problem for this season at the end is, however, you only have one or two ways to resolve the series. And that is either it ends in David's death, or you have to reboot the whole storyline to the beginning. And neither of those prospects really sit well with me.
Right. Well, with the craziness that this show has presented, and that literally it seems like it can just go anywhere. You know, the prospect of rebooting the show from the beginning doesn't seem that crazy.
No, it's not crazy. It's exactly what they do.
Yeah.
That's what I was afraid of. But I give season 2 4 out of 5. It's a little bit less than season 1, but season 1 was all set up, and this was the first full thing. So we're at a good 4 to 4.5 stars for the first 2 seasons, and then comes season 3. Season 3 for 2019, directed by a whole new group of people.
Directorial debuts.
Yep. Andrew Stanton, Carlos Lopez Estrada, John Cameron, Daniel Kwan, Arashka Stevenson, Dana Gonzalez, and for the season finale, co-directors Noah Hawley and John Cameron. Written by Noah Hawley and Nathaniel Halpern, but oh no, they brought a bunch of all new writers. Oh no. Olivia Dufault, Katie Thulin, Charles Yu, Ben H. Winters. Most of it by Hawley and Dufault, who also comes on as a co-executive producer in this final season, based on stories by Claremont and Bill Sienkiewicz. Released June 24th to August 12th, 2019.
It's almost like they were like, hey, I've got a cousin who was interested in directing.
I don't know. Starring the same strong cast with additions Lauren Tisai Switch, who's a time traveler, we'll get into that in a second, and Harry Lloyd as Charles Xavier, and Stephanie Corneliuson as Gabriel Haller, who are, of course, David's biological parents. What it's about. Division 3 is now operating mobily on the road and in the air, seeking a means to stop David before he finds them and kills them. But he's since calmed down, and he and Lenny have just started their own cult to worship him as he creates a drug from his own psyche to make everybody love him. Because that's all that David wants, is for everybody to love each other, especially me.
That's funny.
Enter a teenager named Jia Yi, Lauren Tasai, who lives in a rather sophisticated life, all while listening to Mandarin lessons on time travel through her headphones. Throughout the day, she finds symbols that refer to time travel and beware the basket, which obviously is a symbol for Fukuyama.
Fukuyama, yes.
Yes. Confused by these symbols, however, she chooses to investigate them further, as they seem rather out of place from her reality. While investigating the symbols, she catches a radio signal on her headphones from Lenny, inviting them to join them, meaning she's not speaking specifically to Shai Ji, but to anybody on the term to come join the cult type thing. She also hears the voice of David in her mind telling her to follow the yellow bus. So she finds the yellow bus and she gets on the yellow bus and goes. And she eventually arrives at one of David's cult houses where she is recruited to join the cult. And she meets David, and David doesn't like her name, so she calls her Switch. And David's accepted his powers and is more now relaxed in nature. And he's like, I'm not going to destroy the world, and everything's fine. I'll just mind my own business over here and make people happy type thing. Yeah. David is interested, however, in finding a time traveler because he plans to change the past to save his former friends because they keep chasing him and trying to kill him. It's just not very fun, Their
harshness chill, man.
Yeah, it's just not, So anyway, suddenly Division 3 agents raid the compound, killing some of its members. Carrie arrives and chops off David's right arm, which prompts David to evaporate her and some of the agents. Like I said, he should have done to Lenny when he found out his sister was but they're gone into ash. And then Sid arrives and kills David by shooting him point blank in the chest, which you'd think if he has all these powers, he could just zip. I'm fine, but never mind. In her shock of all this going on around her, Switch escapes through one of her time doorways and reverses time by 1 hour. Goes back and tries to warn David. despite her pleas, he stubbornly stays in the cult and fends off some of the agents because he's like, I'm badass. I can stop everybody. But then he gets distracted by the presence of Farouk showing up and gets killed by Sid yet again. So Switch reverses time again, only it's 2 hours back. And this time she finds herself in the astral plane with Farouk, who's aware of her powers. And he goes, listen, young lady, David is very dangerous, and we need to stop him. So I'm going to offer you a chance to join us instead. And she refuses and escapes through yet another time doorway. And he's like, oh, dear. Okay. So he goes back to Division 3 headquarters, which are now set in an always flying dirigible aircraft. Okay. And he informs Clark about David working with a time traveler. He doesn't know her name or anything. And he says, I guess we have to kill her too, because otherwise he's just going to turn back time and erase us all from existence. And during this, Carrie now has created an android version of Autonomy to go side by side with the Vermilion. And now he's got his own body, but he's also the mainframe. Okay. So that's how he kind of evolves into something new again. As Division 3 prepares for the raid on David's commune again, because they're doing the time all right again, Farouk informs Sid about what has transpired and says, hey, how about you don't participate in this raid because he's expecting you, and if you don't show up, then I'll throw him off type thing. But she refuses. No, I'm going to take his ass out because of what he did to me. She is just that angry about being violated. Let's put it that way. So they arrive at the compound ready for yet another attack. However, a blast from the compound ruins the mission, and the team stares because they find that the compound has been teleported, because this time David has listened to Switch, and rather than fight them, he just teleports his group away to safety. After teleporting the compound, David talks with Switch about her time travel powers, and she tries to show him how it works, and she opens a doorway and passes through, but David's unable to pass through it despite her trying to get him inside. It won't work. And that's because of how her powers work versus how the realities of time and space and whatever. Inside the aircraft, the floating dirigible or whatever, Clark interrogates a member of David's cult that they had captured before they teleported away as to where David's whereabouts are. And the cult member refuses to elaborate because he doesn't know anyway. So he's sitting in this chair and looking out amongst the skies, and they're like, tens of thousands of feet in the air, okay? Almost, like upper atmosphere type levels, right? And he goes, okay, you don't want to help us? Fine. Ka-chunk. Drops into the sky. And they're like, well, did you give him a parachute? Well, maybe. Did you give him a parachute? Did you give him a Yes, he gave a parachute, and of course he's now got a tracker and everything on him. And so he lands, roughly, but on the ground. And Lenny picks him up, unaware that Clark is flying a tracking unit on this cult member. Meanwhile, David and Sid are still communicating through astral projections. And David states the community is used to help more people in trouble, which Sid completely says bullshit. You're just having everybody suck up to you. And he's like, no, I'm going to use time travel to fix everything, and nobody's going to be hurt, and everybody will be fine, and everything will be just fine. And she's like, nope, you're the problem. And you fail to acknowledge that you're going to end the world. You need to grow up, and you need to surrender and do. And this just, he's like, he loves this girl. So he's so upset that she won't side with him. So his emotions start to affect the drugs that he's creating, that the cult uses, which causes them to become erratic and aggressively in nature. So Lenny then takes the recovered cult member to a tea party out in the woods. We're now in Alice in Wonderland in order to drug him, right? But since they're being tracked, the D3 agents converge on their location, and they capture all these other cult members, but Lenny's nowhere to be found. And they're like, what happened to Lenny? What's going on? Well, Lenny has snuck in and stole one of their cars, locking Carrie inside the car, the mail Carrie. And Carrie is taken to David's compound, where he's escaping his containment room by fooling a stone member of the cult. And then he encounters David, and David states, I'm not here to harm you. We're not here to hurt you at all. I just want you to help me create a device that will help Switch increase your power and allow me to time travel. And Carrie's like, I'm not helping you. Oh, yeah, you are. Drugs. And then Carrie gets drugged by Lenny, and he is subsequently alive by David. And David actually does what Carrie do, and he absorbs himself into them and takes over Carrie's body. And Carrie accepts helping Switch, and he's given a new lab to start working. And David, through Carrie, states that this will allow him to save the world. As they travel to the past, 30 years plus prior to the events of these series, which is even more actually, because if you think if it's 30 years more, it's literally the 40s and 50s that they're going back to, because the time of all this are getting all screwed up. But the nature of the show says 30 years. Gabrielle Haller cares for her son David in a mansion, while her husband Charles Xavier prepares to leave for an important trip. We discover that Charles is a mutant, able to read people's minds, and he's created a device that helps him find the other mutants on the world known as Cerebro, but it's not mentioned as Cerebro in the show. A World War II veteran, he meets Gabrielle in an asylum, and we see them in the asylum, and we find out that Gabrielle was a Holocaust survivor who suffered from catatonia from seeing her family and loved ones killed by the Germans. As her condition improved, they fell in love and married, and had David as her only child. So now Charles is working on the prototype Cerebro, and he's detected Farouk, and Charles sets out to Morocco to find Farouk and meet with him, because he's like, hey, mutants, I'm not alone in the world. I can find somebody who's like me. And alone in the mansion, however, Gabrielle starts having new delusions as well as hearing voices. But those voices are turning out to be from the future versions of David and Switch, trying to get her to do certain things to help David, the baby, basically. Despite managing to travel so far in the past, however, they are unable to properly communicate because the time and space doesn't allow it, basically. So Gabrielle's sanity is worsening, and she feels that the house is haunted by them. To complicate matters, a shadow has been lurking over her and the baby David, and that's the younger Shadow King who's about to enter the body if they don't stop him. She is later called by a panicked Charles, who states that meeting Farouk was a mistake and he's coming home. The delusions worsen for Gabrielle, who is tormented by Farouk and David's attempts both to hit back at his tricks and, trying to protect the baby, more or less. In a desperate attempt, however, David appears as a ghost projection, but he appears in his modern day clothing, which is so much different from the period that Gabrielle's in, and that causes her to faint. Charles then arrives, and he sees David, and he thinks that David's the thing that's attacking her, so he telepathically expels both David and Switch back to the present. And David wants to go back, but Switch is physically and mentally drained from extreme time travel. And the time travel is already bad enough because every time she has to time travel, she pulls out a tooth out of her mouth.
Ouch.
To set the trigger as a rule. And she's losing all of her teeth as the further back she goes and stuff. And when you go into timeline, there's these time demons, and you have to avoid them and keep them from going through the doors and all kinds of stuff too. So it's she's got quite a full plate. And so
I,
she loses consciousness, and David's desperately asking her to wake up because he's afraid that Farouk is going to take over the baby while they're back in our time. Back at the mansion, however, Xavier's trying to wake up Gabrielle and realizes that she's reverted back to her catatonic state, which devastates him emotionally, so he doesn't realize that Farouk has now entered the baby, effectively possessing him, thus starting the whole chain of events over again. Cut to Daniel Debussy, who is Clark, the Division III interrogator's partner, who's traveling in a van protected by members of Vermilion. The van is intercepted by David, who kills the Vermilion and confronts him. And the thing about David is, well, you can't get any information from me because they've already wiped all the pertinent information from my mind, so I have nothing to remember. And he's like, oh, really? Well, let me restore all those lost memories to reveal the location of Switch and everything else that I need to know. Does that. Daniel confirms that she's on the airship. Thank you very much. He now erases all of Daniel's memories and leaves. Not just the memories he lost, all of them. In other words, he's basically a blank slate.
that's some cold-blooded shit.
Yeah. David returns to his cult and kills many of them because he can't find Lenny. Lenny was affected by the time demons and claims that David is to blame for the death of her girlfriend from the cult who was carrying their child and had given birth to their child. And those characters are now dead from the time demons who are eating all the time in reality and space. And everything that's wrong with me is your fault. I want nothing to do with you. And that trips David's anger some more because he's like, what the hell? You're my boo, you're my bud, type thing, And she refuses to hear David's plans to change the past and stabs herself in the neck and dies from blood loss in front of him. At the airship, Switch is now given a hibernation chamber so that she can sleep and avoid David. However, D3 is still concerned that David could teleport to their airship. So Ptonomy then decides to elevate the airship and send it up into outer space, where David allegedly cannot reach them. Farouk's going, I don't think so. I don't think that's going to stop him. If he wants to get here, he'll find a way. But they take the airship and go into outer space anyway. So alone, Farouk telepathically communicates with David, provoking him to find their location because, of course, Farouk has his own plans. And with his cultist, David infiltrates the airship, killing most of the soldiers on the airship. David finds Clark and teleports him into space, which kills Clark, along with a lot of the other soldiers. So they're all just floating out in the atmosphere, or not in the atmosphere, but outside the atmosphere of Earth now. He then finds Sid in her bedroom, and Sid's awake, and he tells Sid that Farouk informed him where they were and that he intends to change the past. Sid acknowledges that they were manipulated. Both of them were manipulated by Farouk, and she claims that she still loves him. And then she touches him and swaps bodies. Now in David's bodies, Sid distracts some of the cultists so that Carrie, Ninja Girl, can kill them. But there's something new to the body switch. David's not in the body. It's the other Legion. And they say, who are you and what are you doing in this body? And they proclaim themselves as Legion for the first time, and they just take control of the body and throw Sid out of the body and wipe her memories clean and bring David back to the body. David finds Switch in her chamber, but gets stopped by Farouk, who mocks him. David manages to get Switch to wake up, and she sends Farouk through a doorway, which then sends Farouk in between time, so to speak. And so he's like jumping points from time to time in between seconds or whatever, trying to get back to where he needs to be. And Switch is disturbed by David's nature of killing, but he convinces her to join him in his new plan to undo everything and refix everything, telling her he has a new plan in mind. Cut to another reality. Oliver and Melanie are in a medieval era, where they have discovered a newborn baby who is Sid. And they raise Sid while trying to protect her from the past, including time demons and other things. But she has to come and grow up and come to terms and return to her body, nevertheless. She awakens in the airship and finding that Switch's doorway is malfunctioning, and it's like partially open, but she's unable to enter it. And nobody, it opens and closes more or less like a, not a guillotine, but like just, it's not open long enough for you to get through until you know what you're doing, more or less. But anyway, finding the sea carries, she explains how to stop David and Switch and convinces older Carrie to help her figure a way to get through the time door. But before entering, Carrie asks Carrie to transfer her wounds to him so that she can fight because she's just too tired and too beaten up, which he does at great personal cost. I mean, he looks, it's like, I don't know. He's so badly beaten up, they have to put him in a wheelchair and he can't function. Okay, basically. As time demons appear to eat this whole timeline, Sid carrying and the two Carries pass through the doorway, which finally closes. And this allows them to travel back to the mansion and to Gabriel Holler, where they discover David as a baby before Farouk has taken possession of him. Realizing that's where they're at, Carrie wants to kill the child, Ninja Carrie, and Sid refuses, realizing that the child is a victim and not the David who betrayed them. And that's partly because of how she was raised in the other timeline by Oliver and Melanie. If she didn't have that raising, she would agree, and they'd probably just kill the kid, and that'd be the end of the story. But anyway, Sid confronts Holler instead and tells her never to give up on David and to love him unconditionally, because giving up on him and giving him away destroys him in all hope for humanity. But the time demons are coming to destroy them all, and Sid and Carrie have to choose: protect the infant David or let him be destroyed, one or the other. Meanwhile, David and Farouk are revisiting Charles and Farouk's original encounter in Morocco, and it becomes an astral psychic battle between David and Charles versus the young and old Farouks. Back at the mansion, Holler, Sid, and the Carries are attacked by time demons to fend them off. The two Carries emerge to fight alongside Sid again, and back in David's mind, young Farouk tries to fend off David's alternate versions, and he traps David again, mockingly accusing him of being a bad person. And nobody needs,
Sorry about that.
That's fine. Where's he at?
Oh, my dog's heard something.
Yeah. Anyway, recalling his mother's love for him, David breaks free from the imprisonment and strangles the young Farouk. Switch is found by time demons, and despite fighting, she's too tired, and she decides, I'm just going to surrender myself, let them destroy me. And her father, who has been on another plane of existence and has never been really part of her life, finally suddenly appears and elevates her to a higher level of existence, revealing that both he and Switch have the ability to control time and the ability to control time demons, who merely function to guard the tributaries of time. So he's like, you're now on my level, on my plane, and I'm happy to see you, and let's fix things. And she's like, okay, but we have to do certain things I want to do first. So he's like, of course, we'll fix things. So Charles confronts the present Farouk in the astral plane and claims that he has traveled back in time to save David. And Charles doesn't buy that, but they both travel David's mind as he's just about to kill the young Farouk, and Charles says, that's not what I want you to be, takes him out to the astral plane. And Charles says, I'm sorry, your condition is because it's my fault. I wasn't there for you. I should have taken better care of you. I'm sorry I abandoned you. I'm making a deal with Farouk that'll allow all of us to live peacefully as long as they leave David alone, apologizing for failing him. President Farouk convinces young Farouk to agree to these terms, by showing young Farouk everything that's going to happen to that's, if they don't do this, or what has already happened throughout the series, basically. David isn't really wanting this. He wants to end Farouk. But Charles convinces him to stop. And Switch stops the demons from attacking Sid, Gabriel, and the Carries and the baby David. And things stop for a second. And she states that now the past events will be changed and they will disappear and create new versions of themselves. At the monastery, David and Farouk shake hands, signifying the end of their fight. The two Carries, the younger Carries become old, more like the same age as male Carrie, and they're now separate from each other and can hold each other without merging. And it's kind of like a happy thing for them. Sid waves goodbye to them, and Charles returns home, reconciling with Gabriel and saying things will be fine. And the older David goes to his old room where Sid is waiting and looking at baby David in the crib. He comments, "I'm surprised that you, after everything I did, that you would still stand by me." She tells him, "I didn't do it for you. I did it for him." And they acknowledge that as the timeline will be different, they will never meet at Clockworks, and they will never see one another again. And they both expect better things for each other in the new timeline. And they vanish in front of the baby David's crib. And the timeline is reset and rebooted. The end.
Cop out! Cop out!
Yep. And that's very much a disappointment in comparison to those two earlier seasons. And I think it just has to do with how many new writers and directors there were, and that Howley he let an overly feminist viewpoint enter the timeline, into the whole storyline. Now, it didn't go woke, and I'm not saying woke, no. It just pivoted into this whole mommy and daddy's love will fix everything vibe.
Now, do you think it's possible that this ending was because, they knew this was the last season and they just had to come up with an ending and this is the best they could do on a short, notice?
No, this was they knew this by about midway through second season.
Okay.
According to what I've read.
And another question. Do you think the narrator is a watcher?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Because it does deal with multiversal stuff. I was like, it's the narrator is either Xavier or it's a watcher.
Or it's another one of David's personalities that is never revealed.
That could be too. That's a good one.
So, it's hard to say. But, like I said, when it goes to that whole mommy and daddy's love will fix everything, I just like,
yeah, cringe, yeah.
From Oliver and Melanie raising Sid to David's family, I'm the family father figure and it failed, to Sid telling Gabrielle to be a real mom, to Switch meeting her father on the higher time plane because she was never able to be with her father up until that point. It just got way overwrought and overplayed, and it just gave the ending of the series. I mean, I knew this was what they were going to do right away, So I was like, no. And just having Switch in the story at all told me that's what they were going to do with a time reboot. But that was a disappointment in and of itself. But I will give the character credit. I mean, they did make Switch an interesting character. I like Switch. I like the sacrifices she makes both physically and emotionally throughout the series. Losing a tooth every time you time travel until all your teeth are gone, or you go further back in time. There's like when she goes too far back in time, all her teeth fall out at once. And
tooth horror makes me cringe.
Yeah, so it's really cool in that regard. But the thing is, she's the losing of her teeth is also like losing your baby teeth for the power.
Right.
So after she's lost all her teeth, now she can grow and meet her father and go into her true power and be a time lord, if you will.
Basically, yeah.
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 So it was kind of cool. But the fact is, we don't really know for certain whether or not Farouk caused his personality disorder. It certainly didn't help any, but we don't know if it was causation for it. And the story at times shows that Legion is not on board with David, and they have their own agendas at times throughout the season, and they just never really address that.
So all of David's personas are a collective called Legion,
Mm-hmm.
which is the only reference to Legion in the entire show.
Exactly. So, I felt like they kind of lost the plot, and that was because to me, it was these other personalities that overwhelmed David and take over the body, and they're the ones who destroy the world because, it was one of the evil personas. Like I said, I thought it should be one of David's other personalities that took advantage of Sid and not David,
Right.
And that Sid realizes that when she switched bodies and then got attacked by all the different Legion, instead of, it's like, oh shit, what's going on? That's what I would have thought would have been the reveal in a way for her, but it didn't turn out that way. It would have given some reason for her to forgive him instead of, nah, I just did it for baby you.
Well, and again, with the point where in season 1, where she says, this isn't my body, you think that wouldn't have bothered her much at all.
Right. But the thing is, it does, because
it's a betrayal by him.
Yeah. I think it's partly because of betrayal by him. And I think it's also because there's just that character's sexuality is very contradictory in nature. She always says, nothing bothers me and I don't want touching, but what she really wants, her deepest desire, is to have that intimacy.
Right.
And without it, I think that she just feels so violated without it. So I don't think she just, I don't know, but I just wouldn't have done that. I would have done the more diverse personas like Crazy Jane was done in Doom Patrol myself.
Yeah. She was done extremely well.
Yeah, I think I would have done something more akin to that. But that's just my opinion. This season had way too many first-time directors, and yes, season 2 had a bunch as well. But again, Howley was pretty much the only writer and producer, and they had a vision, and everybody saw Howley's vision through. And this season just felt a little bit rushed, and I think Howley just had too many plates to spin because he was making a movie, and he was also working on the Fargo TV series at the same time.
That makes sense.
And some of those people also worked on some of those that are on Fargo and other things. It was their first directorial stuff was on this. So I was like, okay. I also didn't like the resolution between Xavier and Farouk. After all, this is the Shadow King we're talking about.
Yeah. And Charles was basically, we'll let bygones be bygones. Just leave the kid alone.
Yeah. And I get it. You want to leave the Shadow King available for future appearances in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, especially if you can get Naveed Megabon to play him, because he was perfect in the role. But is it just me, or there was no conclusion?
Yeah.
It's just this kind of, there's just no resolution to anything. It just started over. And there's this sort of melancholy, feel-good ending in a way, because, all right, yes, sort of, but not really.
Right.
Because you got to look at the deaths of some of the characters. Autonomy is dead by the end of this. Amy is dead. Lenny is dead. Clark is dead. Clark's boyfriend, the other D3 agent, is dead. all these other characters that have been wiped out of existence, and yeah, it's all rebooted and erased. It never happened, and David's going to have his own life, and Sid's going to go relive her life, and we don't know if any of the other characters are going to have their lives or not. That's never inferred. All we know for sure is that David and Sid are going to get to relive their lives. So, what was the point of this series?
I don't know. It really ended up not having much of a point, and to whether or not it had any sort of any sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Any sort of effect
Yeah,
on the regular Marvel universe. Like, was this 612? Was
yeah,
this what universe was this?
right. So this season only got a 2.5 stars out of me as a result. And so when you add 4.5 plus 4 plus 2.5, you get 3.5 for the overall series. And that's what I chose to give it.
And unfortunately, a lot of great series seem to have very mediocre endings that just kind of ruin everything.
Yeah. And, but let me tell you, for 27 hours invested plus in this series, it's a real disappointment for the ending.
Yeah.
So you haven't watched it all, but now you know. So you're going to be tempered.
But as I've told you before, spoilers don't really spoil it for me. They just kind of
Mm-hmm.
make me want to watch it more.
Sure.
And
Well, what I'm saying though is you're going to have a tempered reaction to it
right,
because you
exactly.
know it. Whereas I didn't know that was coming. I mean, I knew it. I figured it out before it came, but I was like, please don't, please don't, please don't. Um, I would have done something where I would have made Legion the danger and not David.
That makes
And
perfect sense. Yeah.
I would have had Sid and Gabriel and Charles and Farouk together give David the strength to know he's loved enough to reconcile his schizophrenia and heal himself, and then he's just David.
Oh, you would have had Farouk part of that, hey?
Farouk throughout the series keeps saying, "Yes, I possessed you, but you are like my son. You are like my son. I care about you. I do care. I do care." So give him that if you want, you know, um, in a way, if you have to, or you do it because you just need his power to just bolster theirs. Either
Right.
way.
Yeah, I mean, because it ultimately is the Shadow King. So, like,
Yeah.
is he being real about that, or
Right. But he can have his own agenda to do it. But regardless, David ended up healing himself. He'll still have the different personalities, but it's like, no, I'm in control now. You don't have to go back and relive your whole childhood and all that.
right,
You
right,
know, you can accept your trauma and move forward. And then he could have still been with Sid instead of, well, we're going to erase it and you're never going to see each other again. Goodbye.
yeah, that really sucked.
I think that my version would have been better, but that's just me.
No, I agree. I agree. They definitely could have done a better version, a better ending. It could have been better done.
So that is our discussion for the Legion series. Um, Next week we'll have something a little bit more fun. I mean, don't get me wrong, this was a fun series to watch. It's just it just ends on a real downer for me, and it's an exhausting watch.
Yes, it is.
So there's that. But with that having been said, um, we'll say next week will be the Netflix TV series Wednesday season 1. Thank goodness we're not going to have to watch 27 episodes. We've only got 8 to talk about. That'll be enough. But in the meantime, let me see. I've got to find things here if it'll show me. Coming next week, I will be on Grant Lankard's YouTube channel for a live draw starting at 9 p.m. at GW Lankard 1 on YouTube. Next week, Thursday, we'll have our comics and reviews and comics discussion. Chris will be joining me then. We'll be talking about a number of books. I'm not exactly sure which ones we're going to be talking right off the top of my head right now. I gave you a list. Do you have the list?
Yeah, hold 1 second and I can grab it. Yeah, we are going to be discussing Batman and Dylan Dog. We're going to be discussing.
I found it. Gotcha Man,
Yeah.
June.
Yep.
One Shot, Galaxy of Madness from Mad Cave, Epitaph of the Abyss from Oni Press, the new EC type comics, Parliament of Rooks #1, and Space Usagi 1 and 2, and possibly some more as well. Again, that will be next week at 9 p.m. And so that is that. And then Friday, next week, again, we'll be talking about Netflix's Wednesday for 8 p.m. And I think Chris will be back for that as well.
Yes, I will.
Okay, so that'll be next week's shows. And then on top of that, yeah, I'll find it here. I know it's here somewhere. It's being fussy. People have been asking me for my schedule moving forward on the show. This is a tentative schedule, not the final schedule. Mondays, we'll do crowdfunding talk. Tuesdays is what's in store this week. Thursday night will be roundtable discussion, reviews, and live draws. TV night discussion on Friday night. Weekends will be live draws with Q&A shorts 2 to 3 times a week. I'm thinking Monday might actually be manga night where I talk about manga exclusively. And then Tuesdays will be crowdfunding talk and what's in stores this week. And then the rest. But we haven't officially finalized that yet. Okay? So that's what's moving on forward. And we thank you for watching.
Yeah, sounds like a great schedule and some great upcoming shows.
And thanks for watching. Or for those who, it's almost a 3 hour, it's over 2.5 hour show on this one. So people might not be as thrilled to watch this one. But I hope you enjoyed the discussion, or if you've watched part of it, or you will watch it in reruns. So until later, it's time. Nevermore.
Nevermore.